Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us. Thank you for listening. Thank you to this amazing event. And what joy to finally meet you, Bénédicte. I see him a lot, and his philosophical bantering is endless. So I am going to remind everyone this is a fireside conversation. I won't be shooting off questions. It's not an interrogation. I'm going to have certain thoughts put out there, and I would love both of you to comment on observations that we have about our wonderful industry and our wonderful relationship between India and France, and of course, craft diplomacy, if I may say so. To start with, I know there's a lot been said about the craft industry today. And as we know, the ones who live here, that craft is a lived experience. It is something that is extremely grassroots. And it is something that is about rural communities. It is about ownership, pride. It's very bucolic. You know, craft exists in agricultural lands. This is the nature of craft in India. So when we have this very elevated conversation about craft as luxury, and I pose this thought to both of you, maybe Bénédicte, you can start, is that how do we then be very careful that craft doesn't become a commodity? However luxurious, how do we take on the challenge to keep craft to what it really is, especially in a country like this? It starts from the grassroots.
Thank you. I'm so glad to have this conversation. I read a lot of things about you before this conversation. Just few words to say about the previous panel, that I got the message from the curation. We have to work on the curation. I got the message that this is important, the curation of the shop here, the curation of the event. So I got the message. Regarding the craft, you know that the part I prefer in my job when I took my position 4 years ago, after 30 years in journalism, is to visit workshops. It's so important. It's a root. Everything started with the workshop centuries ago, and this is our main asset. I love what you said, Sabyasachi, when you say that what difference between a good brand and a major brand is integrity. You said that, and it's so true. And integrity is in workshops. Integrity in the work of hands. Integrity as the history. And we are not an industry like another. We are a cultural industry. So the link between the economy and culture will have to be cherished. We have to cherish our artisans. This is the main assets. And I think that in France we are convinced of that. That's why each year we reward our artisans. We made that Nights of Arts and Letters, and this is we made artisans our role models, and I think this is really, really important to cherish them.
I'll just remind you of something that happened not so long ago. In LA, the writers from the movie industry were at strike because they were asking for better paychecks and also about the invasion of AI. You know, I was sitting and watching. You know, when we talk about the new consumer, you know, our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren, what are they going to be born as? Are they going to be born as robots, or are they going to be born as humans? The answer is very clear. They're going to be born as humans. You know, today we live in a very strange world. Bandana, when you talk about commodity, I see what really is commodity is when you know, it's opposite. It's almost the opposite of sustainability. When you're producing bigger, stronger, faster, a lot of it generated by technology. Today the world is divided into two. So we have people who live and thrive within a technical world which is completely infested with technology, and another world where people are dropping out. So I dropped out of Instagram about 3 years ago, and I probably have never been happier. And I think that today there will be two kinds of consumers. Maybe the larger consumer is going to be who are consuming because of what social media dictates. And for them, they're going to be people who are going to consume commoditized luxury. But then there is going to be another set of consumers who are going to drop out, and they're going to create this silent rebellion of humanizing the world a little more, because we are human beings. You know, if everything from joy, laughter, sex, every relationships could be expressed in the artificial world, who are we as humans? And I think there will be a more collective consciousness of people moving towards things which are made by hand, things which are touched by humanity, and that is going to become the bastion of true luxury. Now, today when I look at what Hermes is doing or what Chanel is doing, you know, I was keenly observing what Chanel is doing with its VIC program about setting up separate stores for their VIC consumer. I think people are quickly realizing that there is going to be a consumer who will pay for rarefied crafts, because craft is really getting rarefied. And you know, I say that courage can skip a generation, craft cannot, because you know, if craft skips a generation, then we won't have craft for the future. You know, from the little that I see and I observe and I speak to people, I think there is going to be an unprecedented demand for good craft, and that is going to become the backbone of modern luxury, as we call it. It's almost going to be a reversal.
So that actually begs the question, Bénédicte, because in this industry, that means while we are toggling a technologically savvy society year after year, and we are going to deal with AI on a more realistic level as opposed to just reading about it. I mean, I'm a writer, and everyone came to me and said, ChatGPT is going to take over your job. And I thought, what is the way I can survive as an authentic writer is that I have to now experience the product or the process even more authentically. I have to deep dive even more, immerse myself so my story becomes unique and is able to tell a much more authentic story than before. So then I'm, you know, who can replace consciousness and who can replace this level of experience? So Bénédicte,
who can replace hands, and who can replace hands? Not the artificial intelligence.
Do you feel now that, you know, the brands have to be even more aware that this is the world that they're competing in, right? So do they have to be more immersed in what they're delivering as authentic luxury?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why, I don't know if you pay attention to that since maybe 4 to 5 years, the luxury brands open the door and bring people behind the scenes to show the artisans. It's new. It's really new from 5 to 6 years. And I think it's a good way of thinking for the future, because they rise their prices a lot. And people have to know that if they pay products very expensive, this is for one good reason. It's because it's handmade. And handmade with people that work a lot, with passions, to make lovely things. They need a lot of expertise. It's a long training. So all that participate to the message of the new luxury industry, with very attention to these assets, wonderful assets that are craftsmanship.
And so this brings us to the interesting question of, so who is the consumer? Because, and maybe Sabya, you can start with this. The consumer of today can be generalized in so many ways, but I've had this conversation with you before, and you were very specific about the Indian consumer. There is no doubt all eyes are on India, and rightfully so. Big legacy brands who have to sell here, and the exchange of beautiful ideas, aesthetics, products. But have we nailed the Indian consumer, which both Indian designers and Western designers are hoping to captivate and capture?
So Bandana, before I talk about the Indian consumer, let's talk about the consumer as human beings. You see, one very good thing that happened with social media, though I'm not a very big fan of it, is the fact that in many ways it united people. So everybody has a community. So everybody can discuss their problems, their fears, their insecurities, their anger, their political will, their love. When you divide human beings end up becoming underconfident. And humans essentially are people who are communal in nature. But when you put them in a community, they start becoming stronger, more resilient, and more confident. I'm going to say a very controversial thing that I've said many times before in my interviews, that fashion for the longest time has made a lot of money by feeding on people's insecurities. But today, so earlier brands used to decide what the consumer would buy, and you see a major reversal that's happening because the consumers are deciding what the brands should sell. That is because when you put people in a room where they're allowed to have thoughts and exchanges, people become more and more secure about their self-identity, and then they start dictating to the brands what the brand should be producing. And I think today we have reached a very unique place, and you will see in years to come, and you can throw in a comment, that brands which have built their businesses with integrity, which have focused on the product first and marketing second, are brands which are going to become the brands of the future, because you are talking to an extremely confident, extremely decisive customer. While we have tangibles and we have intangibles, I think if your intangibles far outweigh your tangibles in terms of product, in terms of craftsmanship, you will not be able to get a great gross margin out of your product anymore, because gone are the days when you could use very big influencers and you could throw a great party, and then you can spend billions of dollars in advertising and just get in the consumer. The consumer today is like, there's a difference between a consumer engaging with you and a consumer buying from you. So, when you spend money in marketing, a lot of consumers engage, but how many of them are buying is the big question. So I think as the market becomes more and more confident, and rightfully so, for the longest time, what has happened is that, any sort of consumerism, Bandana, is a sign of human greed and corruption. So there has to be a reset, and that reset will be now done by consumers and not by brands. Because the consumers will dictate to you that you'll have to produce better, produce more with more integrity. There is going to be about, the most important thing in craft is it's going to be about provenance. Where does the craft belong to? Who are the craftspeople and who's selling the craft? So I think we are going to go into the new chapter of luxury right now, which is again going to go back to how luxury really started. It was really about the product and not about the marketing.
And if I can add to that, it's amazing that you say this, because in my advocacy as a sustainability activist, and I work a lot within culture, and this is years back when I thought, how can we put forward the idea of buying something where it's not just a thing? So I thought, you have to tick. And as a writer, if someone said, can you write about my brand? I was like, can you tick these 4 boxes, the 4 Ps? So, of course, there's a product, but do you have a story about the people? Do you have a story about the process? And is there a purpose to what you do? So it's not interesting anymore to just say it's a beautiful product. If you don't have the process, the people, the purpose behind it, it seems a bit of a shame to be creating in a vacuum where there is no ecosystem that can thrive within, that can encourage others to thrive too, along with you. So, Bénédicte, would you tell me that since, France has been always at the forefront of creating this behind the scenes, let's talk about the process and what have you, and so has India, by the way, and you can get to that. How much of it actually builds this national spirit? In fact, I think it's in a Boston consultancy group research that you were part of. I read where, Western legacy brands, consumers, when they're asked, what do they value, amongst other things, some of the most important things about the brand, and one of them was the pride, the sense of identity, the sense of national identity that you get when you have the whole story explained, not just the product.
Yeah. Regarding sustainability, I want to come back to 1 second to sustainability. 1 year ago, we asked our presidents, what are your main subjects for the year coming? And the first subject, worries. And the first issue was human resource. Second one, sustainability. So it's to say that sustainability is the huge issues for the years to come, because it's a systemic one. You know, it questions everything, from the people, of course, but from the sourcing to the after sale and all the entire life cycle of the product. So it's a main subject, and I have to say that I discovered, when I took my position 4 years ago, I discovered Maison really committed to working all together on that subject, really. And we started to bring all the Maison together around a manifesto, a common manifesto. And it was a huge step. And then we started to share best practices. And then we produced already 2 reports. And then we started to communicate on the subject. The companies were very shy when I took my position. I don't want to talk about sustainability. And why? Because I'm not perfect. And in luxury, you talk when you're perfect. I said, why not? You're on the road. Nobody is perfect. So we are working all together and try to, improve all together. And we started to communicate, and they were so surprised that the audience was, oh, you're doing things on sustainability? Yeah, we're doing things on sustainability. And we work on human resource too. We work on diversity, work on inclusions, all that subject are addressed, in our maison. And even for me, because I was a journalist before, it was a surprise to learn that from an outsider to an insider, to discover that. And this is still the main subject we work on.
Bandana, I used to do a television show for many years. Ambika, who's sitting here, she was my co-host. So the show made me a household name. So every time I used to go to the airport, everybody used to say, oh, I love your clothes. Well, it was a show about taking 15 girls from India and making them into brides, and these girls came with their stories of human resilience. Somebody was who came to talk about sexual abuse, somebody who came to talk about male oppression, somebody who came to talk about patriarchy, and we created these human stories with these girls, and we told the stories through the premise of a wedding. It became a very, very famous show in India, won many awards. We lasted 10 seasons on television. And everybody used to come and tell me, oh, you know what, I love your clothes, we want to be a Sabya bride. The narrative has actually changed a lot in the last 7-8 years. When I meet girls and Indians across the globe, they just say one thing. I think it's a little, how do I say, pompous to say this, but they all come and tell me that, you make us so proud. And I wonder that how did the narrative shift from good clothes to pride? I think, when one has to understand that if luxury is rarefied, the codes of luxury are even more rarefied. Luxury is not just built very easily. Luxury is built through resilience. Luxury is built through integrity, which I think is very important. And I'm very proud of the way we have built the brand. We don't customize. You have to have a professional financial document to be able to shop with us, which means that you can only shop with us with registered money, not with non-registered money. We pay 100% taxes. We have our compliances in place. And we work very hard to build our community. I remember, Bandana, these are stories that we never tell, that when COVID happened, I sat down with my CFO and I asked him, how much money do we have if this was to last for a few months, because we never knew how long this would last, that we need to make sure that not a single person lost their job. And he said, we are good for 3 years. I said, okay, we are safe. Not not a single person lost their job, nobody lost their lives. We started creating, at a war footing, we started creating quarantine centers. We stopped making people use public transport. We started giving out personal transport. We created a hospital on our roof. We also made sure that there was, we flew in caterers to come and stay with us for a year and a half so that nobody had to buy food outside. It's not just integrity of product, it's also integrity of believing how important your ecosystem is for you. I think, when I look back, my pride is not in how many celebrities I've dressed or in how many red carpets my celebrities have walked in, or whether we have been in a fashion show outside, or whether we have made it to magazine covers, which we never make into because we are almost like a hibernating brand. Our pride comes from the fact that we have done things the right way. And I think when people watch you, your consumers watch you, and when you do, when you create a brand in the right way, sometimes by just keeping your head down and working hard and slowly sharpening your skills, because it's very easy to go from point 2 to point 8. It's very difficult to go from 8 to 9, because these are little small invisible changes that you're making that only you notice and nobody else. And people say sometimes that, why are you so bothered about this small little change? Do you think your customer cares? And my answer is, I don't care if the customer cares, I care. And there will always be somebody who'll be watching you in silence. And I think integrity of how you build a luxury brand translates, because you see, we don't need another handbag. We don't need another piece of clothing. We don't need another piece of jewelry. But we could do with a little bit of pride. Even if the pride is not ours or is borrowed from somebody. Like, when India wins a cricket match, the first thing that we feel is a sense of pride. I think human beings, for us, when I tell people that, when people buy from us, what is it that they should take back? Is it the satisfaction of a good product, or pride in themselves that, I've worked very hard, I've bought a piece. I know so many of my friends who buy from Hermes, and they say, we just feel very proud of buying from Hermes because of the way they've built their business. I think that's real sustainability. A lot of sustainability is visible. A lot of sustainability is just culture. And I think it's very, very important to be able to build a brand 360 for a brand to last. For me, when I was selling a part of my company to Mr. Birla, and a lot of people were very shocked when I sold 51%, because they thought the Sabya would never sell. I don't have any children. I don't want to make the mistake of, making my brand collapse because I have hubris or ego that I'll run it on my own. I wanted to make sure that when I sold, I just said something that, me and my generation of people will probably not even see what success is. Maybe the next generation or the next generation will see it. I remember Nandana Sen. She gave me a book on French Vogue. I think it was a Vogue magazine from the 1940s. And she said, I've given you this magazine as a gift. And I was looking through that magazine, and many people had big ads. And there was a small little ad handwritten by a small company at that point of time saying, we are open for business. And it was Tiffany. And that was the only brand that I recognized. And the rest of the brands I don't even know. So they've all got obliterated by the sands of time. And I said to me that if my brand does not last 100 years, I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not going to last 100 years. But I want to give back to India what India really truly deserves, is a luxury brand that is steeped in India, because I think the country deserves it. And a lot of people who are buying from me know that we are building for the future, not for us.
I love so much your story, and just a fun story. I often talk in front of students, and the first questions I ask usually is, what is your definition? What do you like so much luxury? Are you studying luxury? And many times they answer, because I love shopping on Saturday with my friends, Avenue Montaigne, and going to all these luxury brands, and say, I think you made the wrong choice. if your pleasure is to do shopping Saturday, Avenue Montaigne, please, studying trading or being an advocate and do another things. Working in luxury is not shopping Saturday afternoon with friends, and luxury industry is not about expensive products. No, it's about all what you said just before. So just an anecdote about the...
That's also what I find fascinating, because our definition of luxury can get very limiting, because we sort of limit it to a thing, a product. And at the moment, I'm working for an incredible project, which is with UNESCO, and it's called the Great Himalayan Exploration with Royal Enfield, the bike. And the whole premise of it is documenting intangible cultural heritage. So I think luxury, to me, a layperson who tries to consume as little as possible, luxury is still very limited in the way it is, sorry, let me rephrase that. Luxury is not limited. The understanding of it is limited in the idea of acquisition, that I must own something. But here is my question to both of you. Again, as a normal consumer, on the one hand, you tell us, buy less, but buy things of value. At the same time, this is the industry that runs on novelty, on newness. So how do you reconcile that conversation? And how does that reach ordinary consumers like me?
So I'll tell you. I don't think any other Indian brand has been as trolled as I have on social media. And people troll me for everything. My models never smile. The lehengas are always red, and it goes on and on and on. The people will always have an opinion about who you should be. But it's very important for you to have an opinion about who you should be and who you are. And I've always said that, let's talk about a few people. Let's talk about Madonna in her fishnet stockings and her crucifixes. Let's talk about Frida Kahlo with her unibrow and her peasant skirts and her flowers in her hair. Let's talk about you, Bandana, with all your jingle jangle. Let's talk about your totem pole. Let's talk about Simi Garewal in white. Let's talk about Jackie Kennedy in her pillbox hats. Let's talk about Audrey Hepburn in Givenchy. Let's talk about Edith Piaf with her penciled eyebrows. Let's talk about Rekha close home in Kanjivarams. I've always said that it's repetition that makes a look iconic. And I think when you learn to dismiss criticism and start believing in yourself, you're creating something authentic or something of value for your consumers. I said everybody is entitled to an opinion, but what is most important for you to stay true on your path, like, Christian, who I've done many collaborations with. The good thing is that when we talk, we learn so much. And I've learned that, he said that in spite of what people have said, he stayed true to his own dogma of what his brand should look like. So for me, I think novelty is important, but novelty will never give you longevity. What's going to give you longevity and where people are going to remember you is when you stay true to who you are. And, because we are talking to a very hyper-intelligent consumer today. And true brand is a brand that stands for an identity. Bandana, if we talk about luxury and we talk about the fact that luxury should be rarefied, there is nothing more rarefied right now more than human values. As we all fall prey to greed, to consumerism, to everything else, what becomes more and more and more rarefied is human values. If you can capture those values into a brand ethos, whether it's staying true to your identity, whether it's being about creating a product with the right integrity, whether it's about tinkering the product in a way that only you know that it's been done well without even, like I'll give you a simple example. Many of our linings in our clothes are printed with silk screen print. Sometimes we do it with 16 colors. Some of the jewelry and the back of our jewelry is all embedded with VVS diamonds in ENF color. A consumer will come and say, will you change the back so that the price can drop? I'll say no. But they'll say, why? I say, because it matters. But nobody will see. I said, it still matters. Because one day you're going to appreciate what you have. We try very hard. I don't even think, we don't even call ourselves a fashion business anymore. I don't even know how to label ourselves anymore. But what we want to do, we want to create products for our consumers that can stay. Like, I'll give you a small anecdote. I started very poor with only one tailor. So I believe that most of the clothes that I made, including my first design school project coat that I made, I don't remember who I sold it to. Like all my best clothes that I made, I used to make it myself. I had a pattern maker, I had a master. I used to print and dye the clothes myself. They were all done by my hand. I don't have a single piece for my archives. We are trying to build a new archive. I have a new CEO. She said, we must build an archive. Thank you, Sumati, for joining us, by the way. And we're building archives. I've spoken to every customer that I remember were my first consumers. And I've said that, I'm going to pay you 10 times the price in which you bought the product. They say, we'll only loan it to you when you have a museum, but we'll never sell it to you. I think my customers, and many of them are not on social media. They could not be bothered about how Bollywood dresses. They exist below the chatter. If they walk into your stores, you will not even know. Like, we sell everything from a $100 belt to a $1 million jewelry. So if you look at the range of the consumers, many of them come, you will not even know that these are consumers. But they know exactly what they want. They know their mind. And
because you're talking about this, I have to interrupt. You need to go deeper into the Indian luxury consumer. And I'm going to put luxury in quotes because they may not come from the kind of places that we recognize them to come from. And I want you to deep dive into this because I think the whole idea of this exchange, India and France and a craft legacy, I think there's a great need for understanding what the Indian customer, consumer, and I hate using the word consumer, the human being who's going to participate and enjoy a beautifully crafted brand. But we want to hear about very specifically, because we've had this conversation before.
Let's talk about the Indian consumer. One of a colloquial word in India is a word called jugaad, which means quick fix. So,
Also fix something that already
exists or find a quick fix. So one of the biggest jugaads in India was a concept called the missed call, which means if you didn't want to pay for a call, you called a friend 3 times, you made one call and you dropped it so that you wanted the friend to call you back. Then, let's talk about sustainability. Our mothers never threw anything away. If a sari got torn, it got converted into a blanket. If, I remember that we used to get our milk in plastic packets. My mother used to wash it, air it so that there was no smell. And she used to give us tiffin in them. Indian women for the longest time never washed their saris. They put it out in the sun in winters because the strength of sunlight disinfected the saris. When I talk about the Indian consumer, there's a word that I use which is called dheet, which means a consumer who's very stubborn. This consumer is very stubborn because the consumer is very sure. The Indian consumer, Bandana, is educated. A lot of the education comes from life itself. A lot of the education comes from school. The Indian consumer is also someone who will not pay you a larger gross margin just because of you have a bigger brand ambassador. So many times I have got friends who are very highly placed in society who will say, I'll go to Graph, I'll see a piece of jewelry. but I'll get it copied by my local jeweler because it's diamonds after all. It's only a 4-prong setting. Why should I need to pay a gross margin for them? There was actually an ad that ran in India where a woman, I think it was a mobile phone ad, where a woman goes into a jewelry shop and she tells him, show me another piece. And while he's showing another piece, she takes a picture of the jewelry and goes to her jeweler and says, make it. So in many ways, we had to really, really, really fight for our existence for the longest time. What it has made the Indian consumer is very resilient. And the Indian consumer, which a lot of people don't understand, because sometimes you should not judge a book by its cover, is an astute and a very, very intelligent consumer. They can come in all shapes and sizes, irrespective of where they come from, because they had to work so hard to be able to get to where they are today. I think, we are people who have been victims of partition. We are people, all our wealth has been uprooted in one day. I think we have gone through what we call is the biggest, the biggest cultural genocide. So I think when we have survived from all of that and we have come to where we are today, and the nation's doing well, alongside all of that heat and jugaad and intelligence and resilience is a new sense of nationalism. Today when I look at Indians placed all over the world, they're doing fantastically well in IT. They're doing very well in arts and entertainment. They're doing very well in medicine. They're doing very well in architecture, literature, movies, music, everything. The Indian consumer does not feel any less today. And when you become more and more confident about who you are and your identity, it's going to be very, very difficult for brands to come into this country and try to sell their wares without engaging in them. Every day when a consumer comes in, the first question that they will say is why. They say that the Indian consumer bargains a lot. The Indian consumer is constantly looking for a better deal. My question is, why should you not? Because at the end of the day, who doesn't want a better deal? But the Indian consumer also knows that if you have created something exceptional, and if you stay true your ground, they will convert. Bandana, I'll give you an example with my jewelry business. We are the only jewelry business in the country that sells at MRP level, because in India, jewelry is the biggest commodity market. We had the first brand in this country that have created a jewelry brand which is based on MRP prices, where there's no discounting. You still have to give your PAN card. We will not customize jewelry, and we stick to the finest of quality. In the beginning, people did not buy our jewelry. Now more and more people from all over the world are coming and buying our jewelry because we have excellent craftsmanship, we have excellent quality. And irrespective of how difficult it was in the beginning for the first 5 years when I was setting the business, I stuck to my principles. I remember when demonetization happened, I told my CFO, shut down the stores, because there were people in Delhi coming with packets of money and saying that, can you give something? I said, no. For 25 days after demonetization, we had absolutely zero sales. My salespeople were panicking. I said, don't worry, people will come back. And we have never bent. And I think while the Indian consumer is also looking for a bargain, they also respect values and integrity. And if you can give a great product and if you have great integrity, this country is yours.
So is it fair to say that perhaps this generation of consumers that you're talking about, who are unapologetic and not bogged down by what I call post-colonial blues, do you think that is a big shift? Because it is necessary, because now you can, it's an incredible country to be in. We've proved our mettle in science and technology, economy, you name it. We can stand on our own without having the crutches of the past. Do you think that plays a big role in the attitude of the younger generation?
I'll tell you a small story. I think it's going to sum it up all.
Many stories.
I was in my New Delhi store, and there was a girl shopping for her wedding, and she came to me looking for a Kanjivaram sari. And I was there, and she was a tall girl. I could tell from her demeanor that she was educated outside the country. She was wearing I remember distinctly, she was wearing a leather bomber jacket and a pair of jeans, and she had a Chloe bag. And so she said, I want a Kanjivaram sari. And so I asked her that, how do you want to wear the sari? She said, no, I want to wear it with flowers and a little bindi, and I want to do a small ceremony. And, we are having a small ceremony in Devigar. The mother was sitting very quietly on the side. And the mother said to me, I felt, my mother doesn't speak English. So I just felt very, there were women walking around the store in Vuitton and Dior and Chanel and Hermes with their boots and their black pullovers and their big diamond nose pins. And this woman was sitting quietly in a salwar kameez, and she looked a little defeated. So presumptuously I went to her and I said that, your daughter's buying a sari, can I make you a sari too? So she looks at me very shyly and she said, no, my clothes are done. So I said, oh, but she said, will you make me a veil? Because, with the clothing that I'm wearing, the other designer is not, I'm not going to name the designer, but the other designer is not making me a veil. But will you make me a veil? Because you're so kind on TV. So I said, yes, I'll make you a veil. That's not a problem. She said, you know what? I want to wear something modern, but I still have to do the rituals and I have to cover my head. And I said, so what are you wearing? And she showed me a picture of a strapless gown. And I was like, all right. But that's the India that we are talking about. My mother used to wear beautiful Bengal cotton saris, and right now she wears jeggings and tunics with sneakers, because she told me that, listen, all my life I've been in a kitchen. All my life I've worn a sari. Now I do not want to go to the local market and shop. I want to go into Spencer's because I want to push a food cart and I want to go down the escalator and I want to listen to piped music. My mother had nothing. So right now she wants to redefine her life by looking at things that were never hers. But the young Indian who's born in India today is educated abroad. They don't have problems. Their gender roles are very fluid. They talk about, there's so much acceptance about everything. Parents will allow you to do everything. So there is no repression. When you grow up in a free world when there is no repression, the first thing that you seek out is your identity. Because, I always say that if you try to shove identity down people's throat, people will protest. But when it's a free world, the first thing that people will discover when they go out in the world is, who am I? Because within the milieu of people that I go to, like when I'm going to Stanford, when I'm going to Harvard, when I'm going to Cambridge, when I'm going to Oxford, when I'm going to IIT, for my socials, while I'm a global citizen, I want to be an Indian. So I don't know the amount of girls who come to us and buy graduation saris, because for their graduation day, these girls want to wear a sari, irrespective of whether their mothers are wearing suits or gowns. I think that's a great India. It's a young India that's extremely proud of who they are, and they want to embrace their roots in a completely modern, unapologetic way, and that is going to drive the future of consumption in this country.
Wonderful. You do talk a lot, Sabya. I was like, where's the full stop? Where's the comma? So as we near the end of the session, I want you to both think about, if there were a bunch of students sitting around, Bénédicte, what would you want them to take away from your beautiful country, and given the symposium's theme? If there were all kinds of designers who want to work in the luxury business, 2 takeaways that you want us to take from you. And Sabya, you can start thinking about the reverse. If you were sitting with a lot of French investors in the luxury business and they want to come to India, what would you like to? By the way, there's a last question. This is not the last question. So I said only 2.
The first thing regarding what just have been said, that I think that we are progressively shifting from a global luxury, worldwide vision of one luxury, expanding everywhere, to a luxury with local identities. And I think it's the most important. It's one takeaway. The first one is that, I'm sure that every brand is really aware of that. They're working on to maintain strongly these cultural identities everywhere in the world. And the second takeaway is that all I discovered since one day here, and the conversation I had today is that I'm convinced that there is a place here for luxury, strong Indian luxury brands, building a strong community here, collectively, of a strong market, and with a place for Western luxury brands, taking care of the local identities, Indian local identities.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. Now, Sabya.
So any French brand trying to come into India, I have only one thing to say to them. You are coming into a very resilient country, which has a very strong sense of self and purpose. Don't be in a hurry. Don't try to change, collaborate and adapt.
Brilliant. I think there were 3 of those there. You snuck in a third advice there. So the last one, which is something that I think about a lot as we do different kinds of jobs, not only in the fashion industry, but as employees, as bosses, I always imagine, what does the new leadership look like? What kind of human being is the kind of leader I want to personally look up to, or I want my daughter to be able to follow? And in that, you know, female leadership is very, very important. So just encapsulating this day's events about craft and luxury, what can craft teach the leaders of today?
Humility.
Absolutely. I think that I was just going to say humility and sensitivity, because craft has existed much, much, much before the biggest luxury houses were born, and hopefully it will continue to exist after all of them have gone because of greed.
Lovely. So with that, I just want to read out, I was just making my little notes, thinking about leadership and craft, and I want to end with what I just jotted down last night. Craft is the symbol of the ordinary man who tills the land and creates for the modern world that we live in. Craft is grassroots. It reminds us about communities, villages. That's how cities, states, and nations are built. Craft is about diversity, not homogeneity. We don't have to be similar. What is common, what has to be common, is our humanity. That our farmlands and villages are key. Craft has to coexist with our urban lives, because craft is mostly rural. Craft is community, craft is local, craft is functional and sustainable. You talked about Jugaad. Craft has a great history of looking out for the environment, creating within the environment, creating with the resources that are provided by the environment. So I leave you with these very simple, humbling words, and it is wonderful, Bénédicte, the first thing that came to your mind and yours about what leadership can learn today from craft is humility. And with that, I thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for this wonderful, wonderful fireside chat.
This is a bag from Janvi.
So I have to call Air France for extra baggage.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to put this here. And it's got the Eiffel Tower here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You know, you were just amazing, because what you started off with was exactly where I am right now. That the most important thing about caring for, of course, is our karigars, but where we are missing out in the world of luxury is how, you know, the real importance on what brands, international brands are, which is where I started off 25 years ago, is the collaboration there. That was really a fun. I'm going to stand up for this. Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah. Thank you, thank you. I don't know what's inside.
Thank you so much,
Hello.
panelists.